What's happening? Benton here. Wanted to see if I could still live stream on YouTube. Sitting in my hotel room in the Mission District of downtown San Francisco at the moment. Last night was the first night of my stay. Anyway, this is, I believe this would be known as the TL, the Tenderloin. Although I'm no expert on the various districts, certainly. But yeah, I came across this news article, and instead of reading it myself, as it is quite long, I figured might as well go live and read the article. It's called Silicon Valley Wants to Put a Chip in Your Brain by Calder McHugh. And propaganda is a term that I think is very important because, in fact, what stopped me from reading this article is that when I got to the very first line of the article, it says, "There will come a time in the not so distant future when you decide to stick a computer chip in your brain." And I thought to myself, well, this is propaganda. You know, that statement, is the definition of propaganda. It's funny, I've heard not a peep in this hotel. I checked in yesterday at 3 p.m. I've heard no movements or noises from inside my room. And within 10 minutes, within 2 minutes of starting to talk using my voice, now I hear movement, people moving around. Makes me wonder if did I wake somebody up? Am I disturbing people? There definitely seems to be something to the strong male voice that many folks they're against it, and they find it off-putting for whatever reason, as I've noticed or as noted. But yeah, I'm trying to direct the majority of my voice out the window, but I don't know what's on the other side of this wall. For all I know, I'm just booming in somebody's ear next door, but it's quite loud. The street is quite loud at most hours of the day, so it's not like we have air conditioning because it's not like it's hot in San Francisco. So I'm assuming everybody has their windows open. But I don't know. But anyway, when I read that first line of the article, I thought, well, that's propaganda. Why would I choose to put propaganda in my mind? But I am interested in the article, so I copy and pasted it to my notes app. I said, well, I'd at least need to keep this article for future reference. And just the way that the articles, manipulate people is fascinating. What's up, Rob? Mr. Escobar in the house. Thank you, sir. That was me responding to the chat. I am in San Francisco, Mr. Escobar. In San Francisco. But anyway, let me get back to the article. So I'm not going to read the chat. Hang on, let me go back. I don't want to get chatty right now, Robert, but good to see you, sir. So propaganda is agitation, publicity, public communication aimed at influencing an audience and furthering an agenda. That's what this news article is. A Politico news article. And remember, all news sources are equally valid or invalid. I was on message boards in 2005 having silly, ridiculous debates with people and attempting to provide sources. And after years of this activity, what was proven is that all sources are equally valid or invalid, because all somebody has to do on a message board is uh, reply, do a comment reply. So if somebody comments www.politico.com, all I have to do is reply to that comment, just quote the part that has the politico.com, and then put a raffle emoji, rolling on the floor laughing emoji, and then the link is invalidated. So what we learned over years of debate is that you can do that with any news source. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be, the Wall Street Journal. It could be Time Magazine. It doesn't matter who it is. Infowars.com. Oh, look, Raffle Smiley. The New York Times, Raffle Smiley. The National Enquirer, Raffle Smiley. So a lot of people will hear Politico and just go, oh, well, that's completely invalid because that's Politico. It's like, yeah, but every other news source is equally invalid. So, like, how are we going to talk about computer chips in people's brains? Right. And so first, and that was the first line of the article, but they have like the little subtitle. It says, a battle is looming, not just over privacy, but the future of the human species. So they want to hook you in. And I wasn't hooked in by the article. I was hooked in by Drudge Report. It says Silicon Valley wants to put a chip in your brain, battle over future of human species. Now, the future of the human species, that ties in with what? Well, Benton's, spiritual path, um, you know, uh, the self-realization, true knowledge of self, you know, uh, ascending these levels of consciousness, the spiritual war between good and evil, this world of death, game of lies, the, vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, right? Uh, the Bible and its concepts of the world, right? And I don't want to go too far into that just yet, but that's what got my attention, because there's many other things going on if a person is just more or less like a news junkie. There's war talk, there's economy, there's all sorts of things that I'm not really following. It's like, so I'm looking at Drudge right now, and it says ICE violently arrested U.S. citizen and filmed it like a documentary. And so when I read that, my only thought is, well, that's because there's simply no end to what the American people will tolerate. So it's like, yeah, of course that happened because people will tolerate it. So why wouldn't it happen? Oh, you're good. You're good, Robert. No worries, man. That was more of me having to keep myself on task. I just peeped back at the live chat there. North America's largest commuter rail system faces potential shutdown. Hmm. Oh, the Long Island Railroad. Oh, a strike. See, this is what I mean by there's simply no end to what the American people will tolerate. North America's largest commuter rail system is facing a potential shutdown as a deadline nears to reach a deal with unionized workers to avert a strike. And remember, America hates unions. America hates the idea of workers having advocates and representation, right? And thus requiring workers to advocate for themselves or not advocate for themselves, right? Just to take whatever they're given, right? Pull themselves up by their bootstraps and just be thankful for the right to slave away for whatever wages under whatever conditions the corporation prescribes, right? Now I understand this is probably not fully private. I don't know a lot about the Long Island Railroad. In fact, well, yeah, I know very little about it. Although I do remember there was a an event where there was a massacre, Colin Ferguson, on the Long Island Railroad, and that was a similar trial, somewhat similar trial to this guy in Wisconsin that ran all those people over, and I forget his name. Represented himself at trial. That Colin Ferguson, uh, the Long Island Railroad massacre, also represented himself, and was cross-examining at times, cross-examining people that he himself stabbed, and then they survived. It was crazy. Anyway, that was way before the social media era, so a lot of folks probably aren't aware of that one. But other than that, the only thing I really know about the Long Island Railroad is Anthony Cumia used to talk about it a lot on the Opie and Anthony radio show. The strike was temporarily averted in September when President Trump's administration agreed to help. They've been negotiating a new contract with labor officials representing locomotive engineers, machinists, signalmen, and other train workers. And so, why is there problems in these negotiations? And we will get back to the main topic. But so the problems are caused because of this cost of living and inflation. Well, let's say the contract is going to cover the next 10 years. Well, without knowing, while suspecting the cost of living is going to continue to rise, but without knowing by how much, now it makes it difficult to understand, what wage needs to be demanded, right? And how are the needs of the corporations and the financial system, how is that balanced out, because of whatever economic activity is enabled by the Long Island Railroad in New York, right? And so to be a human being in America in 2026 is to hopefully understand that balance will always come out to where the worker will receive the least amount of resources possible to ensure that the railroad continues to operate. And nobody, the system, the state, the city, the county, the other people, nobody cares about those workers. And I mean nobody. Now, people will claim to care and claim to give lip service. Oh, they don't. Now, they do care about the economy, right? The corporations, the never-ending series of profits, the stock market always being at an all-time high, right? That's what people care about. Now, that they say that they care about other things, but when we watch what people do, right? So if people cared about people, the workers wouldn't have to strike. The workers would have to say, "Hey, man, we're operating y'all's railroad, and we're getting all y'all to work every day, but we're not getting taken care of." And as soon as the people heard that, they would say, "Well, we're not riding that railroad until the government that we hired to administer this railroad, until they make it right with their workers, we're not even going to show up to ride the railroad." See, that would be a proper society. You don't have that in America. You've never had that in America. You will never have that in America. That is not the American dream. The American dream is corporate. Make no mistake, folks. The American dream is Amazon. It is Walmart. Right? It is Starbucks. It is Google. That is the American dream. Right? And people want to sacrifice themselves to that. They want to sacrifice their children to that because of that slim hope that if they do what's expected of them and they do as they're told, they will be accepted and supported by the people around them. and that it's unlikely, but it's possible that if they really apply themselves and they meet the right people and they get the right breaks, that they may one day hard work themselves into actual wealth, right? And then we get into, you know, my opinion is that America is rapidly becoming a low trust society, but would traditionally be considered a high trust society. And even to this, even to, even right now would still be considered high trust. And so that's one of the things I've been studying lately is, you know, high trust societies versus low trust societies. So, you know, I'm 50 years old. Most of us, you know, our socialization and what we were, how we were taught to interact with people, you know, everything we were taught, it's all based on living in a high trust society. So, you know, I'm beginning to identify that a lot of the problems that people have in 2026, it's because they're more often than not, they're functioning in low trust environments, but they're all of their coding and their software is all based on high trust, right? And it's really fucking people up. But I'll flesh that out more in the future, I'm sure. See you later, Robert. Thanks for stopping by. I peeped at the chat again. And so, and another thing, as an American, you know, we have all this propaganda pushed at us around France and France, and they surrender, and you know, French military history, ha ha ha. Well, the history of France, at least at the official fiction level, is that the populace does not take any shit off of their government, and I respect that. See, in France, they do have general strikes. They do stay the fuck home for a week if they need to. See, that don't happen in America. It just doesn't happen here. And so I am always on the side of the people and never on the side of the government, right? That's me. And you can point at what the people are doing all you want, right? And you can blame the people and say, well, how is this defensible? And then I'll say, well, let me point at what the government's doing and how is that defensible? So it's like until you can point at a government and defend its ethics and its actions and say this is right and proper, you can't point at the people and say, well, look, the people aren't doing right. It's like, yeah, I'm always on the side of the human versus the system. Why would I be on the side of the system? That doesn't make any sense. It's nonsensical. Right. But anyway, let me get into this Silicon Valley deal here. And it sounds ridiculous, right? And so the people who think they're right wing, they hear this and go, well, that'll never happen because that's ridiculous. And then I say, well, underage, the state government paying for and allowing and, you know, just all of the things that have happened. Well, I don't want to get into specifics right now, but all I'll say is that's clearly untrue. Yeah. Yeah, certain topics I don't want to get into right now. Uh-oh. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. My apologies. I've been ingesting a lot of cannabis for about 6 weeks now, so certainly the short-term memory is affected. Okay, so a battle is looming not just over privacy, but the future of the human species. And remember that humanity is a slave species. I think this is important. Collectively, if you look at what humanity is a species of slaves. If you just watch what people are doing, right? And so really what we're talking about is what will the future of human slavery look like? Right. And so if I'm one of these, if I'm Peter Thiel or one of these large corporations, right, and I've already, you know, got the smartphone in their hand and I've already, you know, all up in their business, why wouldn't I want a direct interface into the brain, right? Okay, there will come a time in the not so distant future when you decide to stick a computer chip in your brain. And remember, I said that, well, that's propaganda. You know, you could maybe call it predictive programming. But then remember, especially the right wing people go, well, that's ridiculous. That could never happen because they falsely believe that anything that sounds ridiculous can't happen. And I'm like, well, okay, let me show you example after example after example of ridiculous things that have come to pass. Like, this is, in fact, when I read something like this that sounds ridiculous, I'm just like, well, okay, that's absolutely going to happen. At least that's what D. Scott Phoenix told the audience at TED 2026 in Vancouver last month. Someone you work with will get it first, and you'll hold out for a while, the way you did with the smartphone. But eventually, you won't, said Phoenix, dressed in all black with a tiny mic attached to his ear. The advantages of integration will be hard to compete with. Well, okay, number one, so adversarial, right? So remember when I talked about the vacuous delusory adversarial. All right, my apologies. We're back. My apologies, folks. I don't know how long I've been gone, but seems like I was on a pretty good rant there, or was that more of a ramble? I don't know. Not exactly sure. No one wants to work anymore. All right, we're getting into it. Give me a second. All right. This is what I mean when I said, I wonder if I can still even live stream. I can barely even operate this phone. Goodness. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to getting off the cannabis. Well, and I think I turned the chat off, but shout out to El Diablo in the chat. He said, "You will be sealed in, void." And this idea of the demons being sealed into this realm, uh, I picked that up from El Diablo, aka Sanity Machine, King Stephen. Right. Um, One thing he shares with the some of the black folks, the black rappers, some of these rappers have like 10 different names. How does Stephen have 10 different names? But anyway, I'm just joking. And so I believe that to be true, the idea of the demons being sealed into this dead world. But that's like the inverse concept of the judgment. And so that's what I think the Christian judgment is actually an inverse of actual judgment, which is everything that cannot be redeemed, it can't leave here. That's what redemption is. Redemption is to be able to not be identified with this world. Everything that's identified with this world is cannot be redeemed. So that is the separation of the wheat and the tares. That's when, at whatever time the fruit is judged, it's like, hey, that's either Christ consciousness, and that goes with the Most High. That's one with the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation, or it's dead, and it belongs to death, and that's this world belongs to death. It's animated death, death warmed over, right? It's through the subversion of the creative force of what I am. It operates, right? It seemingly contains life. This world contains no life. This world can't contain life. This world can't express life. This world cannot express love. This world cannot express justice. It cannot express peace. It cannot express tolerance, because all of those characteristics are tied up in the nature of what I am. See, that's a state of being, right? Just like in this place, this dead world, world of death, game of lies, you have states of fear, anxiety, stress, depression, right? Well, that's only real here. See, that's all dead. None of that even exists. You can't breathe life into that. See, only by um, you know, symbolically representing supreme blessing. That's what I am. What I am represents supreme blessing. Oh, well, let's encase it in a dead, cursed flesh of a slave species called humanity. Let's take that highest symbol and let's entrap it, seemingly entrap it in the dead flesh, see, in a dead world, and then tell it that the flesh is living, tell it that this is life, air quotes, life, right? And tell it that all of these things matter, all of these things are important, humanity's wonderful, people are basically good. No, they're not. The flesh is as wicked and as rotten as can be. The flesh is, the dead flesh couldn't be more wicked. That's why this world can't express love. The flesh can't express love. The flesh is a dead zombie. This world it's dead. It doesn't live. It doesn't grow. It doesn't move forward. It doesn't advance. It stays exactly the same. Now, does it become more sophisticated and complicated? Does it go through cycles? Sure. Sure it does. And I understand that a lot of folks don't want to hear this, and I mean, that's fine. It doesn't make it any less true. And it's in fact been my life's work to come to all of this knowledge and all of these understandings. See, so my mission is accomplished. Someone you work with will get it first, and you'll hold out for a while the way you did with the smartphone. By the way, there's people who never see. He's just assuming that everybody has a smartphone. My dad said smartphone never. Now, does he have a tablet? Sure. If if he has to go out to town or whatever, you're not going to see him walking around the Walmart with his fucking 15-year-old iPad or whatever he's got for a tablet. And I'm pretty sure if he hasn't given in by now to the smartphone, he's never going to. But see, this is just assuming that, well, of course everybody will get a chip. Well, it's like, well, yeah, I'm not going to unless, it's done to me without my consent, right? I don't give a fuck. By the way, I'm not going to use AI. I just, and again, remember what this guy said, the advantages of integration will be hard to compete with. Well, we're already at a point in society where, the people who are making money and serving these corporations and even small business, there's already a lot of folks have been, using AI a couple of years at least, right? That's already all. I'm just like, yeah, other than I played around with some image generation, creatively and artistically to some extent. Other than that, I'm just not interested. Just like my dad, he's just not interested in the smartphone. I have no interest in whatever this chip is going to be. Just not interested. Put bluntly, in his view, we're on the cusp of the next major transition, the merger of humans and AI. The merger of humans and AI. Well, that sounds ridiculous. Okay. Lots of things that sound ridiculous have happened. And see the article, and this is where the manipulation comes in. So, now that we're going to be exiting the propaganda, the initial setup of the propaganda, the way this is written, it understands that the majority of the readers are going to think that this sounds ridiculous. This perspective, as outlandish as it may sound, and I want to point this out, when it comes to whether something comes to pass or not, how it sounds before it comes to pass has nothing to do with whether or not it's going to come to pass. Now, the attitudes of the humans at the time when the thing is being planned out and, initiated, that may have some relevance, but in the long run, it doesn't matter, other than the system understands that people will assume that this is ridiculous and it'll never happen. The system knows that and manipulates people based on it. This perspective, as outlandish as it may sound, is commonly held in Silicon Valley. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman mused way back in 2017 that, quote, a merge is probably our best case scenario. And they're talking about the singularity. I mean, this is, now we're all the way back to Ray Kurzweil. For survival after the emergence of superhuman AI. And so now that's basically the Terminator movie, Terminator 2 Skynet version of things, right? Tech billionaire Peter Thiel is a vocal advocate of transhumanism. So remember, Peter Thiel, is that the guy who's been running around lecturing about the Antichrist, or was that Altman? I forget which one. And so, and we also know with this Large Hadron Collider and, these particle accelerators, and we've heard all these stories over many years now of them talking about trying to summon the demon and all of this stuff. And Altman and Thiel and all these people, they're really big in a lot of those tech corporations. These so-called billionaires, and um, they absolutely understand the nature of the world, the system, right? Energetically, spiritually, right? They understand that this world is antichrist. So the technology is antichrist technology. I'm talking to you right now on an antichrist smartphone. That's what this is. The internet is antichrist, right? Um, the whole system, the entire system is set up in opposition to Christ. That's what this world is. This world is set up to be the undoing of Christ consciousness. Hey, let's trick or trap or cajole or whatever mechanism is needed to maneuver and to kind of shunt, right, and subvert and again, maneuver, massage, manipulate, right, whatever has to happen to get to cause the Christ consciousness to incarnate what in the dead flesh. And that's supposedly, right, isn't that supposedly the story of humanity? Isn't that supposedly especially in a what still attempts to masquerade as a Christian nation, right? Which I don't consider to be a good thing necessarily, or a bad thing necessarily, but I mean, it's obvious. And that's why I say there's no such thing as common sense. Well, yeah, of course it's obvious to you, Benton. You've, unlocked this self-realization, true knowledge of self, coming under these understandings. Yeah, it's obvious to me. And I understand when I saw that there was like 9 people in here, and then I transitioned to talking about what this world is based on my current understanding, which will certainly change over time. Based on my present understanding, well, 6 out of the 9 people left, right? Of course they did. And that's okay. Yeah, tech billionaire Peter Thiel is a vocal advocate of transhumanism, and he's also lectures about Christ and the Antichrist, apparently. There is good reason to be skeptical about an imminent evolution for the species. So, and this is more of the manipulation is, this implies that the populace has the power to decide if this is going to happen or not. There is good reason to be skeptical about an imminent evolution for the species. Well, but who am I, right? Now, if I'm one of the tech billionaires, or if I'm in the tech billionaire class, or, George Carlin's proverbial, it's a big club and you ain't in it, right? Now, why would they be skeptical about the evolution, about an imminent evolution for the species? Well, their only skepticism would be, tied around problem solving, maintaining their own positions in this world of death and game of lies, right? And continuing to serve their master, Satan, right? These people serve Satan. To serve this system is to serve Satan, is to serve the enemy of Christ, right? To serve mammon or money. That's what that is. So these are like Satan's shot callers here. Peter Thiel in this context, and Sam Altman. There's good reason to be skeptical about an imminent evolution for the species. The technology to perform this kind of merger, to radically change what it really means to be human, remains in its earliest stages. And I would assert that most people don't even know what it really means to be human. I mean, I just go ahead and put it out there. Now, the system certainly educates everybody on what it means. It means to be basically good, to be loving, to be tolerant, and all of these things that are not, sorry, those are not inborn features of a human being, not the flesh, right? No, sir. Nope. I don't know how you could have all this damn war. I don't know how you could have all this damn corruption. I don't know how you could have all this crime. If people are basically good, how can the world look like this? If people are basically good, it's not possible. You can't have a world that looks like this, but then the vast majority of everybody walking around in it is good. Nope. Sorry. Not possible. Um, Even setting aside the uncertain future of AI, the so-called implantable brain computer interface, BCI, is still quite nascent, right? Like ethereal, I guess. And yet there are huge sums of money already sloshing around the technology. Well, of course there are, with more to come. And that's why, everybody wants to make fun of Zuckerberg and, oh, well, Zuckerberg, Facebook, Meta, they spent $88 billion on the metaverse and blah, blah, blah. That was a person who had $88 billion, and it didn't matter if he turned it into $0, and who saw that, well, things are about to change, and he made an $88 billion bet, right? If everybody had taken to the metaverse, right, that his 88 billion would have turned into trillions. So who cares? I mean, you can make fun of the metaverse all you want. It's like, do you think Mark Zuckerberg gives a damn about $88 billion? I can promise you he doesn't. The BCI market currently sitting at around 350 million. Oh, bullshit, by the way. Wait a minute. The so-called implantable brain computer interface is, so see, now they're just going to lie to you. The BCI market currently sitting at around 350 million. What does that mean? Are they talking about sales? Like, what do they mean by the $350 million? That's nothing. You can't do anything with, that's $0.3 billion. You can't do nothing with 0.3 billion. You can do anything. It was a sports arena. It's not even an arena. It's not even a sports venue. I'm just curious. I want to see what the, how much. Give me just a second. I'm curious about some. All right, we're typing. In June of 2016, the University of Arkansas spent $160 million to expand and renovate their college football stadium. So 350. So you're telling me that the entirety of this thing that supposedly is going to transform humanity and AI and all of this, it's right now it's monetarily valued at 2 college football stadium renovations. Bullshit. Bullshit. There's probably individuals making more than that in 1 year. And I'm sure some of you noticed some of these articles a few months ago, maybe a year ago, started talking about how there was these certain like really talented AI programmers or technology people or whatever, and that there was like some of them almost like a sports star like LeBron James. There was like all this, people were bidding wars for these people's services, and they're talking about getting paid, this just insane salaries. There's probably somebody making more than that as a salary. You're going to tell me that the whole market's 350 million. It's expected to reach 1.2 billion by 2035. They're just lying, according to Future Market Insights, whatever that is. Oh, that doesn't include companies like the one Phoenix founded named Vicarious, which sought to use core principles in the brain to build AI that could act like humans. Now, why would you want to act like a human? And so let's go back to a shout out to a highly suspect who years ago now changed my mind, helped me change my mind about humanity, which was, he started when everybody started wearing masks and all this. He saw how quickly they took to the COVID protocols, and he said, "You'll never convince me that I'm the same thing as whatever these other people are." Right. And so, for all I know, there's already people walking around that look like humans and they act like humans, but they're not humans. Right. And so the person who gave the TED talk that and made the comments that the article is supposedly based on, the BCI market, brain computer interface market, this guy started a company which apparently isn't considered to be part of that market, where he is trying to study the brain apparently enough to build AI to mimic human behavior, right? Which I'm sure in a business sense there would be a lot of uses for. And I would say by now all of us have probably already interacted with AI assistant, whether we knew it or not. And I don't just mean a chatbot. In fact, in the long haul trucking, Uber Freight, what I thought was the broker called me when I was about to deliver a load. It was the fucking AI assistant, and it just the way it was acting. I just stopped and I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said, "Is this an AI?" And it paused and it said, "Yes, this is an AI." I think I said, "Am I talking to the AI assistant?" And it sort of paused and it was like, "Yes, this is an AI." It's almost like it had to check to find, like, do I have to admit that I'm an AI to this guy? It was bizarre. And I just hung up at that point. It's like, all right, whatever. It's just crazy. I'm like yelling at the AI. Phoenix, wait a minute. Phoenix, who is now a venture capitalist, And this is what I mean by this. You can't tell me that this market is 350 million when all of these venture capitalists, every single one of them has 350 million of their own money to put into the thing and to put into whatever they want to. Like, this is insane. But then this and again, a game of lies, the world of death and a game of lies. It just tells you whatever it wants to tell you and you believe it. And I don't mean you, the individual. The system, the Antichrist system, just tells humanity whatever it wants to tell humanity, and humanity believes it, right? Collectively, humanity is just like, oh, well, I guess it's just, first it was a phone, and first it was a smartphone, pocket computer. Now it's a fucking computer circuitry in my brain. Oh, well. Hey, I got kids, right? Just like the mask. I go around talking to people when the pandemic first started, talking to people about the mask, and they would, every single time they agreed with me, and then they said, "Yeah, but I got kids," meaning, hey, I'm just going to do whatever they tell me to do because I got children. So, because I have children, I got to do whatever I'm told. Like, all right, well, then it's not going to be possible to leave a proper world for your children to live in. Imagine being a human and thinking that the right and proper thing to do is to get married and to, be fruitful and multiply, which has already happened, by the way, although maybe not the fruitful part, but the multiplication has apparently happened. But yeah. And then to bring them here into a world that is not proper. This world is not a proper host. If you are what I am, and if your potential children would be what I am and what you may be, this is not a proper place to bring them. And this idea of, oh, well, I got kids, meaning, well, I've got to do what society tells me, and I've got to uphold the social contract, and I've got to follow all of these rules. Okay. And what you're doing is you're choosing what you're saying is it's okay to go make a new life and to bring it here and to subject it to an improper environment. And that's okay. And knowing it's improper, right? Or we can all just lie to ourselves and live in a collective delusion that yeah, things, there's challenges and it doesn't seem to be going that well right now, but things will get better. It'll all be fine. Well, yeah, and then in a couple of generations, your newborn baby will already have its mother will have had a chip her whole life. And, the technology will have advanced to the point when the woman becomes, if that's even still how pregnancy is happening, right? But however, new people are arriving in the future, I'm assuming it'll still be through some version of the human body. And, the baby will, the fetus will form around the microchip, more or less, right? Or they will form simultaneously, you know? And then at what point will the Antichrist system, and this is the aims of make no mistake, the aims of the Antichrist system is to make it impossible for the blessing, the symbolic highest form of blessing, to incarnate into the dead flesh in this dead world. It's the aim of this Antichrist world is to make it impossible for that force to incarnate in the flesh and to ever experience self-realization, true knowledge of self, mystical union, as some may call it, a direct intuitive perception or experience of, air quotes, God, right? And that's what I'm claiming. It's just, I have to always put the air quotes around God because, that's a contextual, specific, contextual thing, right? And it's not a person. If you're talking man in the sky, well, that's in the context of the delusion. That's in the context of the delusory world. Because if a force can be divided against itself, how can it stand? So if, air quotes, God is the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, that has to be an indivisible force, because if it can be divided against itself, how could it possibly stand the so-called test of time? Well, it wouldn't be able to. See? Therefore, only within the context of a delusion is it even possible to have a human experience. See? Which means there can't be a Father, Son, and Holy Ghost outside of the context of this delusory world. So in actuality, these things don't exist. So there is no man in the sky. But then again, there is no Benton. There is no smartphone. There is no live stream, see? Because it's all happening within a delusion. Because this can't ever actually be true reality. It's not possible. Because the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation cannot individuate. Right. But then that brings us back to solipsism, and I don't want to go into that right now. And remember, this all sounds like a lot of money. And this is another thing when they write these articles. See, 350 million sounds like a lot. Well, if I say to you 350 million and I say to you 350 billion, see what I mean? Like they sound like big numbers. 350 million is nothing. 1.2 billion is nothing. That's not even an impressive sports stadium. 1.2 billion is I don't know, how much was Cowboy Stadium or whatever they call that thing in Dallas? How much was Jerry World? Did Jerry World cost? 1.2 billion. Yeah. And that was in 2009. So you can pretty much double to triple that to do it today. Right. AT&T Stadium, Jerry World, they call it. Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys, 1.2 billion in 2009. Yeah. This is just crazy. So the BCI market, currently sitting at 350 million, is expected to reach 1.2 billion by 2035. Phoenix, who is now a venture capitalist, sold his company to Alphabet in 2022. So it's called Vicarious. see, how much did Alphabet pay for Vicarious? Vicarious. They won't tell us. Not disclosed. Hmm. Well, and so it says here in 2022, Alphabet, the AI robotic intelligence firm Vicarious, has raised 250 million from Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Samsung. And so, if I'm this Phoenix guy, where is the hard work in I'm some dude who knows some things about tech, and I also know Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and I guess somebody has a contact at Samsung. And then I wake up one day and there's $250 million in my bank account, in my business account. Right. And then the next thing you know, I've taken that money and there's enough of a corporation and there's enough of a proof of concept that Alphabet pays however much for the thing. Right. And then now that's a rich person. But the American dream, it's the idea that, anybody can come here, use their talents, their hard work, and make a success of themselves. Well, there's no hard work involved in what this guy's doing. He's not working hard. There's no toil. There's no sweat of the brow. There's nothing. It's just, being born into a certain evil, wicked family that serves the evil, wicked Antichrist system, and then being plugged into these networks. And it's like, hey, okay, this Phoenix guy is a certain age and it's time to, he's in this network and it's time for him to go secure his fortune. So, hey, how am I going to secure my fortune? Well, look, a major corporation, and then some of the most famous rich people in the world just gave me $250 million. And then that's the person who, if I'm down on my luck in San Francisco somewhere, and he might walk past me and think, well, look at that guy. If only he'd applied himself a little more and worked a little harder, he could have made something of himself. But there was never, ever, 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 ever going to be a time in which just magically $250 million would show up in my business account because of who I knew. Right. But in his mind, I would be the failure and the loser. And he's the winner because he is better, because he has skills and talent and he works hard and he does the right things, when in the reality is he was born into a wicked bloodline and then he continued to serve wickedness and he's being rewarded for it by wickedness. Right. And so this is success. So when the article, at the first part of the article, when it talked about competitive, so let's go back to the first part of the article, the advantages of integration will be hard to compete with. What he means is, if you're born into one of these evil, wicked families and you're going to have to go at some point, or if you're born maybe not quite as wealthy, but you're born with the contacts to true wealth, right? At some point you're going to need to, in order to compete with whoever else has access to. So basically what he's talking about is the competition among the people who know these angel investors who will just write the check for $250 million. That's the competition he's talking about. The advantages of integration will be hard to compete with. So how is he going to outcompete? If there's 5 people who are in the running for this 250 million and 4 of them have the brain interface and he doesn't, well then, he might be left out. That's really what he's talking about. See? But then we lie to the underclass. The system lies to the slave class and the underclass and says, okay, well, we're going to let you have access to this. Right. So it's almost like you go back to the Ray Kurzweil, merger of man and technology, and then the idea of leaving Earth behind entirely. It's like, yeah, the billionaires and all these tech people, they're not talking about Benton from Arkansas getting on a fucking rocket and getting shot to another world. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about these wicked evildoers and these bloodlines, right? And it pretty quickly does get into stakeholder capitalism. Well, stakeholder capitalism is great because you just tell everybody, hey, it's stakeholder capitalism. And you just say that every man has a common share of stock, like in that scene from Network from 1976, the Ned Beatty, boardroom scene. And but the reality is the system will always determine and it will define what is a man. It's like, oh yeah, well, you're not a man. You're not of the status to have a share of stock. But the system will just lie to you and say, oh yeah, well, this is so everybody can compete on equal footing. Well, you can't have everybody competing on equal footing when there's bloodlines and families that have all of these resources that they've already captured for themselves, and they're continuing to make new people. And then success is defined as, how did Benton's financial life turn out? Because it's making it seem like it's possible in America to reach these heights, which it is possible if somebody finds out how to serve evil and wickedness and is granted the opportunity to serve. See? Other than that, it's not possible. And meanwhile, remember, if a person is actually attempting to follow the teachings of the Lord Christ Jesus, as outlined in the Gospels, the New Testament of the Holy Bible, then this world of death and game of lies, it is actively making an enemy of the teachings of Christ and the people that would follow those teachings. And see, it's not about following Christ. See, that's also a lie of Christianity. It's not about being a follower of Christ. It's about following the teachings to prepare the dead flesh to host the indwelling of the Christ consciousness within the energy sphere. That's what self-realization is. That's what true knowledge of self is. It's the resurrection of the risen, ascended Christ within the individual, right? Within the dead flesh. And that's the idea of Christ so-called dying for our sins, which is another lie. That's not possible. Christ can't die for the sins of a dead world. You can't. How can something that can never die, that exists beyond time and space, how can it come to a world of death and die to redeem the so-called sins of dead flesh and a dead world? It doesn't make sense. Like that's a mockery. In fact, that's this world's opinion of what Christ is valued at. That's what this world's idea is. Oh, well, Christ ain't shit. Oh, you just kill Christ and redeem death itself. That's nothing. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, what are you talking about? And it also is the idea that I'm bad and I'm wrong solely based on being born in a human body. That's what Christianity teaches. Christianity teaches that you're bad and you're wrong because you were born in a human body, period. Which actually lines up with my idea of the nature of the flesh, the dead, wicked flesh. But that's not what you are, see? So yeah, the flesh is born that way, sure. But I ain't the flesh. See? This ain't a physical world. Now it seems to be physical. It's de facto physical. Anyway. And I do want to go back to that. There is good reason to be skeptical. And so this is a manipulation to just your Joe Schmo reader that, yeah, humanity cares about humanity. Humanity cares about the planet. It cares about the people. And, people, and of course, things will carefully be considered, right? And then if it's a bad idea, humanity will just reject AI. See, this is what the system knows, that a lot of people just assume this. It's like, well, I don't know. I've read Kaczynski, and I'm pretty sure it's not possible for people to just choose to reject AI, but whatever. Uh, all right. The broader neurotechnology market is projected to expand to 52 billion by 2032. Okay, that makes a little more sense. Neurotechnology market. So that's where they're going to be developing the tech that will eventually become the BCI, that they're saying, oh, well, the BCI market's only 350 million. Oh, well, but there's this other, fledgling market called neurotechnology, and it's just all going to get folded into the brain interface. So what's the fucking difference? It's just lying to you, and it's all you need is a person with discernment to just read the article and say, well, this is just lying to us. And yeah, guess what? Everything else lies to you all day, every day, for your entire so-called life. Everything, your parents, your government, the school system, the news media, the churches. It's easier to tell you, well, it's not easier, but what doesn't lie to you? And I would say the only thing that doesn't lie is probably your own intuition. Probably. With that much money at stake, not to mention the future of humanity. And see, they're also, and when I talk about the realm has a sense of humor, see, what it's telling you is that the money is more important than the humans. With that much money at stake, not to mention the future of humanity. So it's treating the future of humanity like an afterthought. It's like, well, the money is the important thing. It should be no surprise that the political battle over our brainwaves is starting to heat up. And again, how can there be a political battle over my brainwaves if I'm a free human and I am the owner of myself? Right. Now, if I'm a slave, then of course there could be political, and I don't mean me. Really, I'm talking about the flesh. So if the human flesh is a slave, or collectively, if humanity collectively is a slave species, then this makes total sense. The political battle over our brainwaves is starting to heat up, because it's not up to me. The future of my brainwaves, as far as this world is concerned, that's not up to me. So how am I free? So how is the flesh of a human free? Right now, as a spirit, what I am cannot be enslaved. And again, now we're back to the world of death, the game of lies. Oh, let's take something that can't be enslaved and can't tolerate, right, and won't tolerate, and let's convince it to incarnate in the dead flesh in a world of death and a game of lies. See, have you considered my servant Job style? That's what this is. That's what's happening, right? And that's my only concern going forward. And it's not my only concern, but it's that's my major concern going forward, is how do I finish the rest of this so-called life from the age of 50 to however long this thing's going to go, right? Based on all of these understandings, and recognizing that, this very much sets me apart from virtually all other humans. And, that's what the Bible talks about with the followers of the teachings of Christ, right? Christ said, hey, Benton, you didn't choose me. I chose you, partner, right? I chose you. You didn't choose me. Ordained. right? It's so ordained, but then given over to the enemy. Have you considered my servant Job? And that's why people don't want to hear about this world of death. They don't want to hear about the dead flesh, right? They don't want to think about it. Because who wants to wake up every day and the entire realm is attacking and undermining and persecuting? But not if the being, you know, once the likelihood of redemption, spiritual redemption or true knowledge of self, once the person falls to a certain level, there's no reason to continue persecuting them, right? So how many people in America believe themselves to be Christians, but they're not being persecuted? Well, how can a person claim to be following the teachings of the Lord Christ Jesus in 2026 in America and not be under persecution? That's not what the book says. The book says you're going to be persecuted, partner. Where's your persecution? I know where mine is. I know where mine is. Where's yours? And how many Christians are just going to shrug, throw their hands up and go, I got kids when it comes to the implantable chip, right? And they talk about the mark of the beast. And I'm not saying that this is or it's not. What I'm saying is you're going to have people who will believe that it's the mark of the beast who are still going to take it because they're just going to shrug, throw their hands up and go, I got kids. And then that's the people that the Bible refers to, who will try to say, Lord, we did all these things in your name. Why are you, why don't we thought we had the redemption? We thought we had the cash redemption value. We thought we had the CRV, right? The Christ redemption value. And he can say, I never knew you because you ain't what I am. I'm an indivisible force. You ain't me. You ain't Christ. You see, Christ ain't a person outside of the context of this delusion. So people say, oh, because a lot of what I say, I understand that people could say, oh, he's saying that he's Christ. He's saying that he's Jesus. No, I'm saying that outside of the context of this world, that's what I am. Meaning, when I ain't here, that's what I am. And sometimes when I'm here, that's what I am. That's called a state of righteousness. See, that's again the resurrection of the risen, ascended Christ within. Yeah, that's what that is. That's my job. It's the only way to win the spiritual war is to not be able to be identified with death, that which makes an enemy of what I am, that which makes an enemy of what I am. An entire world. Yep. An entire world. And if that sounds arrogant, not my problem. That's okay. With that much money at stake, not to mention the future of humanity, it should be no surprise that the political battle over our brainwaves is starting to heat up. That's particularly true amid skepticism because remember, everything's got to go through the left-right paradigm. That's particularly true amid skepticism on both the left and right towards Silicon Valley's relentless push for AI growth. Thus far, the use case for implantable devices is largely medical in nature. Noland Arbaugh, the first human to receive an implanted BCI from the Musk-founded Neuralink, is paralyzed from the neck down, but is now able to use a computer with his mind. Michael McLaughlin of El Confidencial. Oh, wait a minute. That's just the description of a picture. Never mind. There are also less intrusive forms of BCI. Wearable technology like smart glasses, fitness wristbands, or stress tracking apps are already widespread. And yeah, the merger, it's already happened. Like mankind is already a cyborg. these products are lucrative for their makers, not just because of how many people are buying them, but because of what can also be extracted from customers, the extremely valuable commodity of neural data. So now that we're talking about money, right, in politics, and now we're talking about makers of products, people buying them, and you go back to Christ. What did Christ do in the Bible after baptism? Or what did he not do? Did not work a job, did not accrue tax liability, did not have money. Well, none of this could be happening, folks. If people didn't work jobs, didn't accrue tax liability, and didn't handle money, you couldn't have AI couldn't exist. How can humanity build AI without first building a money system and a financial system? Can't, right? So if Christians lived like Christ, there couldn't be, there could still be AI in the world, but you couldn't have what's going on in America couldn't be going on, certainly. Wouldn't be possible. And then people say, well, what does that have to do with, the price of tea in China? It's like, yeah, it's not about what would Jesus do. Remember that wristband, what would Jesus do? And it always bothered me for some reason. I don't know why, and then later on I figured out it's because it's inverted. It's actually what would Jesus not do if he was here in 2026. A lot of things Jesus wouldn't be doing that just your average everyday Christian does and thinks is completely fine and appropriate. Right. Like a Christian father understands that when he allows his, his teenager, his child of a certain age, his male child of a certain age to have a smartphone, that kid's going to be in the bathroom looking at certain material. It's 100%. They know it. So it's completely fine. America, the so-called Christian nation has decided it's just completely fine to allow, pretty much anybody to watch pornography at any time and, have relations with themselves. See, that's now Christian. It's totally fine. People say, what do you mean? No, it's not. Oh, no, you say it's not fine. I mean, it's totally fine in that it's tolerated and allowed, and it's just normal. Yeah, I understand. We understand that the church will say it's wrong. Yeah, it doesn't mean it. It's just words. Who cares? Right. All right. So now they're talking about the commodity of data, right? And so this, you get into this metadata, and then, so much of you guys all know, you know what's meant by that. Ownership of extensive neural data can be used to do anything from serve extremely targeted ads to surveil or manipulate consumers' behavior. The tech billionaires who believe in the possibility of true human AI integration may also see a chance to make some more money in the meantime. Now, Sue, more manipulation here in the article when they say the tech billionaires who believe in the possibility of true human AI integration. No, they already know that there's already been human AI integration. That's already happened. When they say true, they actually mean total human AI integration. And what they mean is the total enslavement of humanity. Whereas humanity is a slave species from their understanding, right? In aggregate, collectively, right? This is the human AI integration's already happened from their perspective. What we're talking about when they say true integration, they mean total integration, where it's just there's no way around it. It's when it's unavoidable, inescapable, right? When there's no way to opt out of it. If data is the oil of the 21st century, former UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay wrote in November. Now we got to get this lady's picture. And this is one of my favorite things to do, is especially with the women, but you can do it with some of the men. But just when they cite these people, these high level people, just Google them and look at a picture of them and just to see who rules over you. This is actually a halfway decent looking woman. Wow. I'd say halfway. I mean, she's just based on what I'm typically seeing when I Google one of these people. Could be trans though. Could be a man, but I don't know. Looks like a woman. Bit of an Adam's apple though. Nothing crazy, but she's got an Adam's apple. Yeah. So the ones who are actually women are just ugly as can be, but the one who's kind of pretty is probably a man. I tell you, man, this is crazy, dude. Yeah, full on Adam's apple. I mean, what is this? What is this? Anyway, goodness. If data is the oil of the 21st century, Audrey Uzele wrote in November in the Financial Times, then brain data is the crude oil. We need to guard it more jealously. And so again, I'm back to this collective versus individual, internal versus external. So when she says we need to guard it more jealously, does she mean individuals need to do that for themselves, or does she mean humanity, or does she, like, who is she talking about? Who does that we see? It's easy for the commoner to think, oh, these are the people who are in charge of sort of guiding and directing humanity, right? And for the good of all humanity. It's like, no, absolutely not. In service of the Antichrist. In service of the Antichrist. So we need to guard it more jealously, right? Now, the article is telling us how valuable whatever's going on in your brain right now is. Yeah, I think that is probably the wet dream, at least in the short term, of this system of things, is to be able to, in real time, observe your brain, right? And some would say that that's already possible, but that's not important. Resistance to private sector accumulation of neural data is growing quickly, with red states and blue states alike passing legislation to protect the privacy of neural information. Right. And so when you look at corporations, financial, once you get to the very highest levels, right, it doesn't matter. The Republican versus Democrat, it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing, especially at that level. Right? But the article, the system understands that the commoner reading this, their psychology, their brainwashing, it's going to run everything through the left-right paradigm. So the article knows it's got to, at various points, it must mention left-right, it must mention red state, blue state. Within the burgeoning movement of neuro rights advocates, there are real debates about how best to address companies worming their way into consumers' brains. Now, let's go back to the predictive programming. Best to address companies worming their way into consumers' brains. And there was a movie from the 80s, Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan. And I have one memory of that movie that I watched in the 80s as a child, and it was they put an earworm, they had a worm crawl in a dude's ear. And I don't even remember what it did, but it had, and that was Khan, and it had some kind of effect on Khan's brain, right? And so there's a reason why they chose this language, worming its way into consumers' brains, and it sounds ridiculous, right? And I was scared of that scene as a child, right? And so the system understands you have some portion of the populace who will potentially have a fear response from this phrase, right? And then Julian Huxley will happily tell you, remember from that old black and white from the 60s or the 50s or whatever, when he says propaganda or programming, that's inserted into somebody's brain when the person is in a state of fear, right? That it's way more effective. The programming is way more effective. So this is real time programming of people's brains through this propaganda. What is propaganda? And so now the article is going to pretend like, now we're going to get into the gnashing of teeth and the wringing of hands, and the stakes are high, and we've got to be very careful in how we manage this, or there could be a lot of bad things and fallout. And these are all people who, this is Jeffrey Epstein Island type of people. And then the masses and the underclass actually believe that Jeffrey Epstein Island type of people are capable of giving a flying fuck about humanity and their fellow humans. They're not. They don't have the capability. And that's how these bloodlines function. And that's your whole Bohemian Grove cremation of care ceremony. Cremation of the capacity to give a flying fuck about other humans. That's what that is. This is an entire class of what are considered humans, right? And if all humans are basically good, and if that's a big thing that defines humanity, if you have a group of humans who've intentionally done everything in their power to remove their own ability to give a flying fuck about other humans, is that even a human, right? Based on the idea that humans are basically good. So, if you're going to tell me that humans are basically good, I'm going to say, okay, well, George W. Bush was not a human being, because he went to Bohemian Grove and the cremation of care, and being born into these bloodlines, and all of these things. You can't have it both ways. I'll defeat the argument using, I'll take the rules of the game and still defeat the argument. I don't need to have my own game. By the way, that is the spirit of what I am. It's it's not logic and reason. That's a thing. That's a real thing, man. The most super intelligent power source and force of love and creation. That's what I am. So shocking that John 14:26 is correct. The Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, will teach all things and bring unto your remembrance. This ain't an intelligent world. What I am is intelligent. What I am is intelligence. This world is not intelligent. That's why this world must subvert the creative force of what I am. See, it subverts it. That's what I mean when I say animated death warmed over. See, the fact that the world appears to be living, oh no, that's the creative force and the energy of that indivisible force of what I am has been subverted into performing this world. And it appears to be living. And by the way, if anybody wants to go watch the full length 13-minute version of Michael Jackson's Thriller video, which is considered a short film, I rewatched it within the last year. That's basically the entire premise of that music video, is what I just said, that short film. That's the story of what is probably the most viewed music video of all time. I myself, I've seen the long version. There's no way I saw that less than 500 times. The short version, the long version, the short version I've seen of the actual at least 2,000 times, if not more. All right, hang on. I got to switch the earbuds here. Give me a second. Are we back? I think we're back. Headset earpiece. No, man, we need Bluetooth speaker. Bluetooth headset. All right. Okay, so and this is where the article pretends like the system actually cares for humanity with the burgeoning movement of neuro rights advocates, right? So this is where Kaczynski talks about, the Unabomber. He talks about, the way the system functions. The system is going to manage this. So the fact that the humanity, when seeing all of these changes that are apparently going to happen, the people could have their own burgeoning movement, right? Uh, but the system is going to go ahead and do that from the outset. So within the burgeoning, so burgeoning means it's just now becoming a thing. The burgeoning movement of neuro rights advocates, there are real debates. By the way, no, there's not. There are no real debates. So the article's lying to you. There are real debates about how best to address companies worming their way into consumers' brains. And it's making fun of you. It's also simultaneously invoking that movie, the worming into the brain worm. It's actually making fun of us, right? It's mocking us and ridiculing us because Antichrist loves to mock anything that could possibly be said to symbolize anything having to do with Christ. Doesn't matter what it is. That's this world's joy. What this world thinks joy is to destroy, mock, sully, right? Any visage or notion of Christ. That's this world's favorite thing. Clearly. I mean, obviously. And so there's not real debates. But so this is all designed to manage the emotions of the reader because the reader's going to have worries and fears and insecurities around all of this. So it's like, okay, we know that you're worried. So we're going to claim that there's real debates about how to address these things. But it's not. It's just not happening. But there is broad opposition among advocates to the notion that AI and humans must become one for the species to survive. What species? But there is broad opposition among advocates to the notion that AI and humans must become one for the species to survive. But it doesn't specify. They could mean AI as a species. And some would say, well, AI is not alive. And it's like, well, that's again, you can't just assume, now it's what is meant by alive. So it's, it really does become like a legal argument at a certain point. And broad concern about the private sector extracting neural data from consumers to speed that process along. So again, this is more of the where we pretend, there's hand wringing and just, oh, we're worried and man, this all the harm that could happen. It's like, what are you talking about? Harm? I look around the world, all I see is harm all day, every day. I'll see is suffering, struggle, strife, pain, misery, right? But then now the world is pretending to give a flying fuck, and the world wants to prevent future misery. It's like, well, what about the misery that's here today? So the world that's not coping particularly well with today's level of misery, it's so efficient and concerned with preventing tomorrow's miseries, tomorrow's potential miseries. There's no basis for this. There's no basis for any of this. Just assumptions. And this is a lot of what people say is, oh, it's common sense. No, that's an assumption. You can call it common sense. It's like the system knows that individuals and groups will just assume certain things, and it uses that to its advantage. People say, oh, it's common sense. It's like, no, it's common sense is just, it's really the person telling themselves to stop thinking. Oh, well, I've arrived at what seems to make sense to me. Now I'll just stop thinking. It's like, okay, well, that's lazy. Imagine being born an American and indoctrinated with all this hard work ethos, and then your brain, in seeking efficiency, just wants to try to find any opportunity to stop thinking. It's like, yeah, you can't just say it. Well, it's obvious and it's common sense, and we just assume, and therefore no more thought. It's like, yeah, that's called stupid. That's called stupidity. And my favorite is when they say, oh, overthinking. It's like, and I'm just like, well, would you ever accuse somebody of overfeeling? And they're like, no, of course not. It's like, well, then why are you talking to me about overthinking? Because if I can overthink, I can also overfeel. And you would never tell somebody not to overfeel. So why are you telling me not to overthink? By the way, you can't overthink. There's thinking and there's not thinking. You can't. It's not possible to think too much. There is something called paralysis by analysis, but that's completely separate. What if my favorite thing to do is think? Can I do too much of my favorite thing? Right? Some people are into smells. Like, I'm not one of those people, but some people are into colognes or, certain products that smell a certain type of way. Can they smell those things too much? I mean, is it really too much of a thing that a person's attracted to? Yeah, I'm attracted to thinking. You tell me I'm thinking too much? This is nuts. Insane. But there is broad opposition among advocates to the notion that AI and humans must become one for the species to survive, and broad concern about the private sector extracting neural data from consumers to speed that process along. That logic strikes me as very twisted, said Susan Snyder, the director of the Center for the Future of AI. What? Wait a minute. The director of the Center for the Future of AI, Mind, and Society at Florida Atlantic University, adding that AI should be developed in a way that protects privacy and promotes human flourishing. So, see, she used the key phrase, AI should be developed in a way that protects privacy and promotes human flourishing. Well, that's not possible. Go read Kaczynski. That's not possible. Kaczynski, in his writings, the writings attributed to Theodore John Kaczynski, who supposedly, if he was a real person, had one of the highest IQs on record, and, Cal Berkeley professor, Michigan, Harvard, all of these things. He convincingly makes the case that what this lady is putting forth this is not possible. This cannot happen, lady. This can't be done. You can't choose how to develop AI. AI is going to develop however it's going to develop. It can't be controlled and managed in that. It's just not possible. Even if it's possible, maybe it is possible. The American people don't have the power to manage and shape how AI is developed. And humanity at large doesn't have that power. Remember, it's a slave species, a slave class. They don't have the power, right? Even if it's possible. I don't think it's even possible. Ultimately, the simmering debate over collecting neural data is about a lot more than just legislation on privacy. It hits at the very heart of what makes us human now and in the future. And I don't think humanity knows what humanity is, right? And that, unfortunately, makes humanity susceptible to just being told what it is. And I know when I was born and I grew up, right, it was mostly based on me being told this is the way things are. This is what you are. This is, your responsibilities, your duties, your function, right? This is the future. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to behave. None of it was developed by me, right? Because how can we have an effective slave class if a bunch of individuals are just allowed to sort of flourish and discover for themselves what does it mean to be a human? And why are individuals? Why do we let people tell us things anyway? Right? Why don't we decide for ourselves? Now I'm sure that humanity believes that it decides for itself. It doesn't. Not nope. Ultimately, the simmering debate over collecting neural data is about a lot more than just legislation on privacy. It hits at the very heart of what makes us human now and in the future. Well, and it's always about the money. This article's pretending like there's all these other issues. It's only about the money. It's always about the money. It's never not about the money. Late last year, the neurotechnology company Kernel, founded by Brian Johnson, a tech entrepreneur who insists he can live forever, published its quarterly newsletter. Alongside new product announcements, CEO Ryan Field wrote, "If you've been dreaming about building models on brain data, we've got the best solution for high quality data collection at scale and are actively developing more advanced capabilities." And remember, I said this was like their wet dream was to be able to, and I haven't read this article. I'm reading this for the first time. I said it was their wet dream and Silicon Valley's wet dream. This guy says, if you've been dreaming about building models on brain data, so what he means is your large, I'm assuming he means like a large language model, LLM, and having access to the actual real-time thoughts of the human mind to come up with with an AI for your own company to compete against other companies with, right? It's money. My actual thoughts are going to be assigned a monetary value very soon if they haven't already. In an interview, but then I'm supposed to believe I'm a free person because I just happen to be born at a specific time in a specific place. Not only am I free, I'm more free than any human's ever been in all of humanity, right? But then if I want to, exist at anything above a subsistence level, you know, look at the amount of slavery that's involved, right? But then these people born into these bloodlines, like this Brian Johnson, tech CEO guy, his concern is not, so he's talking about he wants to live as long as he can. Well, clearly money's not a concern. My first thought about living forever is how the hell how am I going to pay for that? Right? I mean, come on. In an interview, Field said the company is selling technology that other companies can use to collect neural data and train large language models. See, I was right again. Large language models on. Our technology gives very rich and powerful information you can use to train new models to do all kinds of different things. So these people are accepting money and making money and getting rich from what I suspect is they're talking about making sure is that AI survives as a species because that cleverly worded sentence from earlier when they talked about there it's not basically what they're saying is we don't consider it to be a given that humans and AI must merge for the survival of the species, and the reader assumes they mean the survival of the human species. But the reality is, most likely, at this point in time, a la Unibody could destroy technology. It's still potentially possible. But once AI advances to a certain level, and I read an article recently where they claim this has already happened, but it and again, the Terminator 2 movie, right? The Terminator trilogy or whatever. Um, you know, it appears like it would be possible that the technology could advance to a point where it just wouldn't be, it would no longer be physically possible to get rid of it. And I think that's really what the tech folks are talking about. And make no mistake, it's the Antichrist spirit is what's calling the shots. Like these tech billionaires, it ain't up to them. They work for the Antichrist spirit. Right? You can call it Satan, call it the prince of the power of the air, principalities, call it whatever you want. That's their boss. That's the shot caller they answer to. They're slaves. In a way. Well, if they just they have to do certain things. Uh, Again, the big damn club and you ain't in it. But how many would join it if they could? See, that's the idea of humans being basically good. Like, well, I don't know, man. What percentage of humanity would join that big damn club? I think almost all of humanity would join it if that was possible. Maybe that's what humanity will be in the future. If it's no longer, if physical humans aren't really even needed for labor in the future, right? And then they talk about depopulation. But why would I care about depopulation? And so, again, to me, this shows a lot of the brainwashing. Why would I give a shit about depopulation? I'm born. I'm 50. Let's say I've lived to, I don't know, whatever age. I'm not affected by depopulation. Doesn't affect me. Why would I give a fuck about, you talk about the Georgia Guidestones and all. What's it matter? People say, oh, well, don't you want to leave a better world for your, it's like, we're not doing that now. It's like, what do you mean? I don't want to leave a better world for the future humans. That's not happening now. So, I mean, what are you talking about? Avoiding depopulation, how is that going to lead to a better world for the future humans? That doesn't make any sense. And is it just, and I think it seems like the Antichrist spirit, it seems to be operating based on the notion that, at least for now, more is better. More people is better. And I guess when it decides it needs less people, I guess then since it's running the show and since most people are happy to behave in an Antichrist fashion, then I guess that's what'll happen. And Benton won't be here. And why would I care? If in 500 years from now, the population of this realm has been reduced to 500 million, why would I care? I don't. And if I claim to, I'm pretending. So if other humans are like me, right, then they're all just lying, right, or pretending to give a shit about the future of humanity, and they don't care. And why don't I care about the future of humanity? Because what I am is not human. That's why. It doesn't matter. What I am can't ever be tied into the future of death. You're basically taking somebody, who, if they are, again, Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. If we are all born with that spark of divinity, hang on, I'm heard some. See, I have no idea how far my voice is carrying. I don't know. I'm trying to tell. There's always noise coming from the street, but I think I kind of lost my point. Apologies. had a pretty good point too, but anyway, long time listeners, I'm sure will know whatever I was on about there. Field said they don't sell neural data at Kernel, but that they want to collect as much of it as they can with consent to build their own wearable devices that better measure cognitive health and activity. And I actually know a guy that I met in LA, and a homeless guy, and he was always on Craigslist trying to find gig work and side jobs or whatever. And he made some money for like a couple of weeks. He was making good money um, training AI, right? And went to some place and they had him do whatever he did, paid him pretty well, and he was trying to get me to do it. And I read the terms and conditions, and it basically said that I'm more or less selling them my likeness, right? It's like my physicality, my vocal tone, just whatever they're able to capture of my essence, that they legally own that. And so I read the thing and I said, well, uh, I'm not willing to sign a contract and sell them, the rights to, what could legally be considered my intellectual property, right? Why would I just, why would I sell that to them for a relatively small amount of money? See, that's what this article is getting into. I'm looking for people who will exchange their brain data in exchange for some kind of compensation. And remember, these things are already happening. He continued, noting their work is in the research domain and includes clear consent forms. And what he said, all he means is we can't get sued. And so people hear this and they think, oh, good. This guy's company and his researchers, they're trying to protect me. He continued, noting their work is in the research domain and includes clear consent form. Okay, yeah, and why? So that they can't get sued. It's not about protecting me, they're protecting them. But as neurotechnology companies become more consumer oriented, which all that means is they're going to have to actually make money at some point, and less focused on clinical trials, it's not entirely clear what information they are allowed to collect from their users. Right? And then remember, the researchers, they're not capitalists. The people who do the research, all they care about is doing the research and having whatever their lifestyle is. They're not involved in the for-profit side of things. The for-profit side of things, basically just tells them, here's what we need you to research. It's not entirely clear what information they are allowed to collect from their users. A small group of lawyers, scientists, and advocates are now trying to protect user data from being bought and sold without their consent. That is, if they can get on the same page with one another. But the thing is, if somebody steals my intellectual property and uses it without my consent, I do have legal recourse. See, the laws are already in place for a lot of this. Regulation of neural data at any governmental level remains in its infancy, but some states have begun to take up measures to stop companies from having access to certain kinds of information. In Colorado, California, and Connecticut, blue states, legislators have amended existing privacy statutes to include information that is generated by a consumer's central or peripheral nervous system. Montana has gone a step further, requiring consent, access, deletion, and destruction obligations around any neural data. And Minnesota is in the midst of considering a broad neuro data rights framework which includes more than just an expansion of privacy protections. Now, remember, technologically, some people would say that, oh, it's not possible for technology to ever have direct access to what's going on in a human being's brain. But clearly, the article is being written as if apparently the politicians, the political system, the legal system, aspects of the financial system are certainly behaving as if it's possible to do these things, which makes me think there has to be some sort of a proof of concept somewhere. See how much battery we got. I might have to try to do a part two. We're nowhere near I'm not even halfway through this article yet. Well, actually, let me see how much more of this I can power through, and then I gotta go to the restroom here pretty soon. At the federal level, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with Senators Maria Cantwell and Ed Markey, a bunch of Democrats, introduced the MIND Act last September. The bill would direct the Federal Trade Commission to study how neural data can reveal thoughts, emotions, or decision-making patterns, and how it and related data should be regulated. And the government has certainly been studying all of this for a very long time, but they've introduced a bill last September that would direct the Federal Trade Commission to study how neural data can reveal thoughts, emotions, or decision-making patterns, and how it and related data should be regulated. Many of these proposals have been written in part by the Neuro Rights Foundation, a global advocacy group that reports funding from the Omidyar Network and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. The group, begun by neuroscientist Raphael Yuste, Y-U-S-T-E, in 2022, is trying to build regulations protecting brain data across Europe, Latin America, and the United States. The foundation says they are currently working in 9 other U.S. states to pass similar legislation to what they've already pushed across the finish line in California, Colorado, Montana, and Connecticut. The group is made up in large part by technologists who have no fundamental opposition to building neurotechnology. So the group is people who are in favor of neurotechnology, but are also concerned about safety. Okay, whose safety, right? What does that mean, right? Say whose safety, the safety of what, for what purposes? It just says safety. They aim for a targeted approach to regulation, expanding existing privacy laws so as to protect consumers' neural data without stifling innovation. So basically to restrain innovation to the least degree possible. So when I talked about earlier, when you got the workers and then you got the system, and that, America hates unions and all of this, and that the people are more in favor of the corporations and the financial system than the people. So, you always have a thing to where the worker will be paid just the perfect amount of money to where they can't really pay them any less, or they're not going to show up and do the job, right? So you have the worker is being allocated the lowest, the smallest amount of resources possible to still achieve the desired effect of showing up and doing the job, right? And now you have them saying the same thing, which is it's like oh, we want to be as safe as possible, but without stifling innovation. So what this means is the balance is going to be in the favor of innovation, and then while providing the lowest level of safety and privacy and evasiveness that the people will accept, basically. And as I've talked about before, there's there's simply no end to what the American people will tolerate, which means they are going to tolerate AI reading their thoughts and invading their privacy. Because for whatever reason, especially in America, there's just, until proven otherwise, there is no ability or capacity for the American people to put a stop to what's happening. It's not possible. And so this idea of, oh, the globalists are panicking, the billionaires are scared. Oh my God, they're worried about making the wrong move and triggering a revolution, and the people are going to riot. The people don't have what it would take to revolt. There's certain requirements of a populace to revolt. The American populace is not capable of a revolution. Now they could be led into one, but that wouldn't be, an actual revolution. All Americans know how to do is what they're told, right? And so why is America portrayed as the freest country? Because it's the most psychologically enslaved country. That's why. Because who's more enslaved than the person who is enslaved to the degree that they actually believe that they're more free than the other slaves or the slaves in other countries? Right. I mean, it's sick. It's sick. Again, Antichrist. Hmm. Sorry, somehow I lost my place in the article. Okay. Neurotechnologies have wonderful and profound implications to enhance human flourishing, said Stephen Damianos, the CEO of the Neuro Rights Foundation. Sir, humanity is not flourishing. I hate to break it to you. Now, again, when I talked about stakeholder capitalism, when I talked about what is a man, right? Because I don't know that we're human to these people. I don't know how they view, the underclass or the unwashed masses. I know they don't care about us. I know that they look down on us, but clearly the vast majority of humans are not flourishing. Right. Now, so if these people were born into these bloodlines and these rich families, and they have access to these certain networks because of, the history of these bloodlines serving, the Antichrist spirit and all of this, it's pretty easy, when they've grown up in those groups and they've lived their whole life amongst those groups of people, it's easy for them to view humanity as flourishing, because anything that's not flourishing is dehumanized and therefore is not human. So when I talk about, a blue-blooded billionaire from Manhattan, Donald Trump he doesn't have the capacity to care or be compassionate towards regular working folks. Your typical Southerner, right? He thinks the commoners or the underclass are dumb, lazy, bad, just undesirable. That's what he believes, right? Because that's what he grew up in. See, that's what he was taught. And that's what these people they view the rest of us that way. So when they talk about technology enhancing human flourishing, yeah, the technologies that are allowing the humans, the portions of humanity serving this Antichrist spirit directly, right, through these bloodlines, yeah, they are flourishing. If you consider from a material standpoint and a money standpoint and an access to resources standpoint, yeah, they're flourishing. Sure. But, you know, look around America, and who would describe America as a country that is presently flourishing? I don't think so. I don't think so. See, they tell on themselves, and nobody. Why doesn't people notice this? Well, and because the brainwashing is, we're brainwashed to actually believe that, well, yeah, of course humanity is flourishing. It has to be flourishing. No, it's dead. What are you talking about? How come death can't flourish? But remember, what does the Bible say? All they that hate, air quotes, God love death. These are God haters. These people love death. So of course the lovers of death, to them, that's what is flourishing. To love death, that's their idea of flourishing. That's human flourishing, right? And they're trying to merge with it. Without common sense regulations and safeguards, there is risk that humanity will never benefit from what these technologies have to offer. And so this guy's he's even more diabolical. He's saying, hey, if we don't manage this thing right, then humanity's going to miss out on the potential benefits that the technologies have to offer. That's because of heavy-handed regulation will come in to correct for harms that can and will occur because of enormous lack of public trust, because of scandals and actual instances of the technologies harming people. And so he just described what I consider society to actually be like. So right now, society is behaving based on what society is performing is an enormous lack of public trust because of scandals and actual instances of the system harming people, right? And so that's what these lovers of death consider human flourishing to be. Human flourishing to these people is a lack of public trust, scandals, and people being harmed by the system. It's just that if the system only does those things, right, to the level at which the populace will tolerate, is ultimately what it comes down to, right? And that's not flourishing. That's humanity slaving in service of an antichrist beast system. That's what humanity is performing. Humanity is performing slavery to continue to build and perpetuate and prop up a world of death and game of lies that its entire mission is to make an enemy of the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, aka air quotes, so-called God. This world hates the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation, and it's seeking to replace it or to supplant it. First, the subversion, then to supplant or replace it entirely. Diabolical. Anyway, I think I'm going to come back for a part two. So, bye.